Everybody, my name is Megan and welcome to the Romance Journey book tag. So I was tagged to this by no one. Andi tagged me in her video because I'd recommended a book to her that she enjoyed, which was The Correct Opinion. And then I saw Becca from the Becca Fowl do it, and I just, any excuse to talk about romance, you know? So I think this is created by 10 booktubers who all submitted questions to create the tag. I think what I'm reading in Andi's description is correct. That's what we're going to go with. But Andi describes everything so much better in her video. Quick apology for the sound. I'm sure you can hear sirens, trains, screaming children. The window is closed and it's warm, so we're doing what we can. So without further ado, let's jump into the questions. I'm also feeling quite lazy today, so if the book is not easily accessible on these 2 shelves behind me, I have 4 other shelves in my home, and I'm not going to I have 5 other shelves in my home that are just for me, and I'm not going to go get things from them because it's hot and I don't want to. And I could have looked at these questions before starting to film, and I didn't, so this is what we're ending up with. Hope that's okay. So the first question, how old were you when you started reading romance, and do you remember the first romance that you read? I was a child. I remember being, oh god, I don't know how old I was, but I remember being quite young and reading my mum's Mills and Boons books. So I don't remember what any of them were called. One of them was about a rock star who hired a nanny, and then there was this whole kidnapping thing going on, and it was a fun time. One of them was about a woman who married someone to clear her brother's gambling debt and broke up with her very sweet charming boyfriend of the time, and then he comes back years later all rich and famous, not famous but rich and grumpy, and I was like, is this a messed up persuasion retelling? I'm thinking about it now. That's interesting, but I was always reading everything I could, so I don't remember the first romance I read, but I do remember those 2 Mills and Boons books, if not in name, in trope, and they were a fun time. I should not have been reading them at that age. They were steamier than I think perhaps is appropriate, but my mum had no problem with it. I had a good time. It's fine. So I've basically been reading romance forever. 2, did you deliberately seek out romance, or did you stumble upon it, and how? I don't think I sought out romance specifically. I knew I enjoyed reading, and then once I started reading more, the romances were what were appealing to me. So I read a lot of books aimed at children, and I just found them not quite what I wanted. They didn't really have romance because children do not get into romantic relationships. So, they do, but not, you know what I mean. So yeah, it was definitely when I discovered that romances existed and it was literally just a book about a relationship, I was like, excellent, sign me up. This is what I'm after now until forever. The third question is, did you start with traditionally published or indie, and has it switched? So I definitely started with trad published. Mills and Boons is it a subdivision of one of the big 5? I don't know. Mills and Boons, Harlequin, that kind of deal. They're all traditionally published. I still read a lot of traditionally published romances, but I do have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, so I read a lot of indie published romances on there, and they fill a need in my reading journey. So yeah, I think I tend to enjoy traditionally published more. They tend to be the ones that are my favourites, that stick with me. There's also ones like Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman, which has been picked up by a trad pub, but it was indie published, and Covenant Roses by Stacey Hart are ones that I'll go back and reread and sort of are favourites, but I guess not to the same extent that Emily Henry and Sarah Hogle are favourites, you know? 4 is, what is a romance trope you were afraid to try but ended up loving? I'm not afraid to try any romance tropes. I don't have an answer for this question. I am pretty much down to try anything. I think I don't necessarily love bully romance, or would be hesitant to try it, but I've not read one. So maybe if I try Zodiac Academy and I'm obsessed with it, then I'll have an answer for this question. But everything else, there are tropes that I know I don't like, but I've read in those tropes and not enjoyed things in them, so there's been no surprises really. Is there a romance book that you read early on in your journey and would rate differently today? Oh, probably. I didn't really rate books until I started watching BookTube, and since then I feel like everything that I've read would remain pretty constant. There's some books I read as a kid in the paranormal romance category, the Drake Chronicles by Alexandra Harvey, which is a 6-book vampire series I did reread, and I used to think they were so good, and oh my god, they were bad. The Morganville Vampires by Rachel Kane, I was really invested in the 6 or 7 books that I read as a kid, and then I read all 15 of them a couple of years back, and oh, that was a mistake, that hurt me. So yeah, I think a lot of the YA vampire werewolf books that I read of the time probably wouldn't stand up as favourites now, like Hush Hush by Becca Fitzpatrick. I do not think that would be a book that I would continue to read the series of. If I picked it up for the first time today, I think that would be a one and done, no more for me, thank you kind of deal. But like, just like straight up romance, I feel like, not really. They're all pretty standard. That's a really boring answer, but that's what I've got. How has your taste in romance evolved over the years? It has evolved in the sense that I read way more of it. I gravitate a lot towards historical romances when I'm feeling like ill or just a bit grim. Like, I love just sort of binging a couple of historical romances. They're always a lot of fun. I know that if I'm going to read any other kind of genre, then like romance has to be a part of it. Otherwise, not has to be, but if it's not a big part of it, then it's unlikely to be a favourite. So like things like The Song of Achilles is literary fiction, but it is very much about the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. So like, that helps. What other books do I have that are like mainly one genre but have romance in them? Like Strange the Dreamer is a fantasy, but it absolutely has a romantic through thread that is like what is keeping me engaged, you know? So I think that's what I've learned, or like that's how my taste has evolved, and that I specifically look for romance in everything. So I will just read romances. There doesn't have to be a split in the genre. I'm quite happy to just read romance, but I also love like cozy romantic fantasy. That's a big new favourite genre for me. So like, as long as the romance is a main part, then like, I'm here for it. What is the most powerful romance that you've read that has left a lasting impact? That's tricky. What do you mean by powerful? There's like been romances I've read that have like altered my brain chemistry, like The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. The love triangle in that, I think, like formed who I am today as a person. Like all of Cassandra Clare's romances actually have like been read at certain stages of my life that I've just been completely obsessed with them. But has it like, were they powerful? Have they impacted? I feel like that's a strange... Have they had a lasting impact? Well, I guess, yeah, they've had a lasting impact. I am now like staring at a tapestry of James Herondale and Cordelia Carstairs because the Shadowhunters is just part of my psyche now. So sure, let's go with Will and Tessa and Jem from The Infernal Devices. I am, in fact, irrevocably changed due to Cassandra Clare's writing. What was the last romance book that told you this is what I'm looking for in my personal life and or partner? It's difficult to say that because I'm not really at the moment looking for anything extra in my personal life. I'm tired. Oh, Chloe's making noise downstairs. I'm tired, I'm busy, I'm getting to grips with finally being back in London and doing all the things I want to do and learning all the things I want to learn. I guess maybe like Emily Henry's like love interests are always like top tier. I love Alex Nilsson from You and Me on Vacation. I love Gus and I love Charlie and I love Wynne. Like, I guess any Emily Henry man is what I'm looking for. Maybe not Gus. Gus was a little bit like, I needed just a touch more therapy, but like everyone else, they're doing good. Sign me up. Which romance books would you recommend to a newbie and a seasoned romance reader? I guess it depends on like what tropes the person would want. Like, you can be a newbie romance reader but know that you like certain tropes in your fantasy or your literary fiction. If you can be a newbie and still want like the smutty side of romance, or you can be a newbie and want to ease in and have a less steamy foray into that. Oh, this is tricky. I guess for newbies I'd go for maybe some Christina Lauren. The On Honeymooners by Christina Lauren is fun. There's banter. It's like a little bit steamy but not like massively, not like erotica levels, and it's just sort of a easygoing time. For seasoned romance readers, maybe Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman, which is a dark romance. It's two people are kidnapped by a serial killer. There's a lot going on in it, and it's just, if you're a seasoned reader, you sort of know what you like already. Maybe that would be branching out into something different. Maybe, I don't know. I think that's about as... It's a very difficult thing to recommend a book to a hypothetical person, because I would ask more questions to someone who, you know, wanted a recommendation. I'd be like, oh, are you looking for like queer romance? Are you looking for enemies to lovers, enemies, like nemesis? Like, there are no real enemies in like contemporary romance. Are you looking for contemporary? Are you looking for historical? Are you looking for fantasy or paranormal? Like, what's the vibe? You know, there's a lot of questions to ask. I guess that's my answer for that. And then the last question is, in your eyes, what are 3 perfect romances? My first one is You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hoggle, which is the book Andi tagged me for, because this is the book I get everyone to read eventually. It is about, it's like second chance technically, but like they're already engaged at the beginning, but it's two people who are engaged. Maybe they don't want to be engaged anymore, but they don't want to call off the wedding because weddings are expensive and they don't want to be on the hook for that. And then throughout them trying to break up the engagement, maybe they realise why they were together in the first place. And it's so good and it's so sweet and I love it so much. Nicholas and Naomi have my heart forever. A second perfect romance, which feels like a lot of pressure, is, so I don't know, it's an Emily Henry book, but I don't know what my favourite one is because I'm rereading them all currently, so I can maybe have a definitive opinion or maybe just have a good time rereading Emily Henry, which is probably what is most likely. But yeah, Emily Henry romances, I'm gonna bundle them together in one pick because I'm cheating, but they're so good. And I definitely talked about most of them in my recent TBR, so check that out because you'll get a vague synopsis of them. But they're just, the banter is excellent, the tension is good, the friendship dynamics are really fun, and I just, every time I read one I'm like, oh, this was my favourite Emily Henry, and then my favourite is always the one I've read the most recently because they're just so good and I'm so excited for her next book. But yeah, and then my third perfect romance is, I'm going to go down the cozy fantasy route with this one. I'm going to go for Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, which is like historical, like Regency, and it's about a woman who as a child a fairy stole half her soul and her cousin saved her, and then during the cousin's season when they're older they go to London and the cousin is trying to find this fancy magic man to help get her cousin's soul back, and it's so sweet and romantic and the vibes are just impeccable. I love it so much and I need to reread it. And yeah, I think that's all 10 of the questions answered without too much waffle. I feel like I could have recommended way more books during this, but yeah, it was interesting to think about my journey as a romance reader. I feel like none of my answers were interesting and I'm not sure that this has had any sort of benefit to how I'm going to go about picking romances in the future. I have quite a lot unread on my shelves at the moment. I need to get on it with reading them, but like I said, I have Kindle Unlimited and I just get sucked in to those trashy romances that are a good time. So yeah, that's about it from me. I'm not going to tag anybody in this because I feel like most people who want to do it have already done so, but if you're seeing this and you've not been tagged, then please feel free to do it yourself. I will link Andi and anyone else I've talked about down below, as well as the people who wrote the questions, because Andi very helpfully tagged them in her video. Please like and subscribe if you want to. Comment what your 3 perfect romances are. Maybe you'll give me some good recommendations for continuing my romance journey, and I will see you all in another video soon.